all right, and distinguished speakers and ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to chair, uh, a part of the today's presentation discussion. So the arrangement is like this: that uh, uh, Professor Catherine Jan, Vice President ANSO, immediate past president of Pakistan Academy of Sciences, and he and me will co-chair in today's discussion. I am actually a facilitator. The theme of today's discussion is fundamental sciences at universities, hands-on experience, and changing practical problems. And I will come back to give a little bit of my observation about that topic. It may be wrong, but before that, I just want to give a little bit of about myself. So I am now the executive director of the ANSO Secretariat. So before that, I serve as the Director General of the Bureau of International Collaboration, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, for a couple of years, and further, a deputy director and head of a number of divisions, including the CS Office of External Financing. And I mentioned that because that about 20 years ago, about 25 years ago, so when the economic situation was not that strong in China, actually the Chinese Academy of Sciences borrowed blended loans from the World Bank to support it basic science and to train some of the young scientists, allowing them to pursue the scientific research at frontiers. And so anyway, that I worked in CES for about 40 years in various kind of capacities. Also, I work as a diplomat, in the S&T section in the Chinese embassy in Washington D.C. So really, you'll find a person that stays in a single institution for 40 years. The reason is very simple. I really like the Chinese Academy of Sciences. It's a very exciting, vibrant, always ready to move ahead and keep its development with the needs of the time, with the needs of this country. So, so lots of foreign colleagues and friends, they believe, by the way I speak, this guy must be a scientist or have some sort of, or has some sort of scientific background. No, I'm actually jack of all trade, an expert of none, So unfortunately, maybe fortunately, and I'm that type of person. So I really enjoy what I'm doing. And I do claim myself, nevertheless, as a specialist in international affairs or international collaboration. And so yesterday, we had a very productive conference. I would say that all the presentations, all the discussions had lots of wonderful points, ideas that actually I had email communication with, Professor Catherine Jan. So we decided to compile the presentations and speeches together and, edit it and make it, available to the wider public. And perhaps that the Vice President of Hungarian Academy of Sciences and, Professor Catherine Jan can serve as the editors. I can assist you to accomplish that task, So we have to make sure that there must be others not here, not at yesterday's conference, who are ready, to enjoy the wonderful points and ideas. So my general comment on today's theme, fundamental science, hands-on experience, and challenging practical problems. So that is, it's the challenging the problems, and the fundamental science, I would say that it really lies in the challenging problems that advances the fundamental science. Also, the two aspects, they mutually assist each other to advance. For instance, for scientific discoveries in bioscience, in theoretical physics, in cosmology, you really need innovations, the big machines. Also, it works the other way around, you know. So the frontier pursues, promotes innovative ideas. So you really cannot separate the two, though that, the distance is getting blurred between fundamental science and innovation. But I have to say that if you have a goal to address it, then actually that promotes the basic and fundamental science. And in other words, there are more stories that you pursue a problem that leads to, the further development frontiers than the other way around. But, again, it mutually, promotes each other. And today's responsibility between me and Kaiser Jan is that he's going to wrap it up. And, I will, do the first part of the speakers, basic introduction. Then, Carson will take care of the, a number of speakers after me. Then he will do the wrap up. So with that, I want to introduce the first speaker of today, and Yuan Yaxiang, Professor Yuan Yaxiang, professor and academician of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. This guy actually needs no introduction in China. He can be a top-level scientific manager, but he decided not to pursue that path, but continue to be an excellent scientist. Of course, that's his choice. And a graduate from Xiangtan University, China, Hunan, 82, and PhD from University of Cambridge in 86, a major figure on mathematical optimization, and a mathematician of many words, and he's also the president of International Council for Industrial Applied mathematics. And I don't want to read that his CV, and of course that a very distinguished guy, and well, I enjoy chatting with him because he appears to me a very humorous guy as well. And with that, so Professor Yuan Yaxiang, you please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chao. Thank you very much for the kind word, and also thank you for the introduction, and also thank you very much for the introductions. I will allow me to share my screen first. So can you see this session is about the fundamental science? So of course, mathematics is the really the very basic research area. So I want to talk about some of the opportunities and the challenges of mathematics nowadays. So start with, I will talk about the opportunity first. First of all, I mean, as all you know, mathematics is really playing a more and more important role in daily life, and also all the different sort of research area. For example, artificial intelligence is a very hot topic, and machine learning, wireless communication, all those hot topics. But the foundation for those, of course, are mathematics. So I will not give you all the different examples from the science. 2.1, so the U.S. National Research Council published a book about mathematical science in 20, which is more suggests importance of mathematics application in important role, different subjects like internet search, and computing, numeric prediction, of I one particular the image processing when people have actually have a famous wet lab trans famous mathematician
Yeah.
formal.
Yeah, Xiang, probably, your sound is not that right, Can you adjust it a little bit?
You cannot hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
It contains lots of noise. Yeah, it's not that clear.
Okay, maybe the internet is not staying in my office.
Huh?
Can you hear me? No.
Oh, yes. You're the friendship hotel, Thank you. Yeah. Contribute your time.
The internet seems the internet is not well here.
Then
but I have,
let's carry on. Let's carry on. Yes.
Okay. That for the bad internet, which is actually not good. Otherwise, good bad signal. A lot of things is about the thing which all mathematician who also medal winner and also have done a lot of research about this area. I just want to mention to you some of the good things about recently happening in China. Actually, about 2 years ago, the Chinese government, the Ministry of Science and Technology, the Ministry of Education, also the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and also the National Natural Science China. These 4 organizations have joined the launch kind of a document or project which is to chase mathematics, to support mathematics in all over China. So that is a kind of a boost really to the mathematical development in China. Within these, we have set up 5 what we call the Tianyuan, which is the Chinese word dating from the old ancient China. A Tianyuan Mathematical Center located in 5 different places. So one is northeast, one is northwest, and the 4 corners of China, and also one in the center, which really trying to develop mathematics all over China, not only in Beijing, Shanghai, those big cities. And also a lot of good news about just starting this year, the Chinese government also starting the next 5-year plan, which is starting from this year for the next 5 years. So the Ministry of Science and Technology will be put about 1.7 billion yuan. So that is roughly $600 million for China for mathematics and application. So this is really very unusual. In the history of China, mathematicians have never get that huge grant. So that will be, I'm definitely sure, will be boost the research of mathematics and its application in China. A lot of things I want to mention, the Chinese Mathematical Society also have a lot of activity to promote mathematical research in China. Particularly, we had the Circle Road Mathematical Center. I want to thank Jinhua Cao again. This actually also supported by the Chinese Academy of Science as well. So Circle Road Mathematical Center, so at the moment we have 12 members. So actually along the Circle Road, for example, the Moscow Mathematical Society, St. Petersburg Mathematical Society, also the Turkish Mathematical Society. And we also hope, more national or countries in the, members in the ANSO organization, those the Mathematical Society also welcome to join the Circle Road Mathematical Center. The main task of this center is to promote mathematical exchange and collaboration along the country, along the Belt and Road or regular organization academic program. At the moment, we have annual meeting every year, and also we have academic program And also other four mathematical, even also the brisk conference. So take a lot, 5 different kinds of terms. I will show you some of the circuit centers. Not go to every, just show you some. I would really the Chinese mathematics done a lot of research in organized, activities in week's mathematics in Beijing, the second Brazil, so the in Kazan. I didn't have a group photo, but I was in that conference. Last year, it should be in India, but due to the COVID-19, the conference was postponed. So the one before, after India will be in South Africa. Now, we'll go back, even though seems very good. The government put a lot of money, and also mathematics is also very important. We should be happy, but I'm still not that optimistic, because we face a lot of challenges in mathematics, even in China, even though we have a lot of money. Because research, money, of course, is the issue, but not the only issue. The first exchange is, I think, mathematics, really a lot of other subjects, other fields, that really require new mathematics. The mathematics we have are not enough for many of the too much the rapid development of other fields at once. For example, in AI, in machine learning, even in brain science, a lot of things with really lack of rigid mathematical theory, or we don't have really strict foundation for those areas. So really require, need, top mathematician to work in those areas. A lot of things is, even though the government ask us, to do more cross-disciplinary research, to ask a mathematician to go to other fields, to do research with other subjects, experts in other fields. But doing cross-disciplinary research are really not easy in China. We don't have the culture. Mathematicians want to just do pure mathematics. So more specifically, mathematician and engineer, normally they don't use the same language. Really not easy to communicate, to formulate their problem. Also, to have that is also another topic of our session, is about education. We really want to train many of mathematical students to know physics, chemistry, biology, also economics, other fields. And another thing is doing cross-disciplinary research are not easy to get recognized. This in the evaluation system is also a big problem. Another thing is about, at the moment, I don't know how about the other country. We have a lot of guests in the audience. In China, young people face a lot of pressure. They have the first year, they have to publish quite a few number of papers, otherwise they cannot get the tenure. That is not good for doing basic or fundamental research. For people doing, fundamental research, we do require a peaceful, well relaxed, environment. But at the moment, that is not true. So I think that we need to ask for a better science and technology policy or environment for those young people. A lot of things, the evaluation system in China, is more designed by, even though by scientists, but mostly by engineer. They like counting numbers, how many papers you publish, how many grants you get. That is really unfair for mathematicians. Maybe good for people doing engineer or doing big other things. And also, that if you publish a paper, they will say whether you're the first author. But in mathematics, we list authors, by alphabetical order. We don't say who is the first author. I mean, this kind of issue is really not what I'm trying to say in China. We have got a lot of pressure, the mathematicians, so that also we don't have big grounds for the structures. So I hope, looking for, governmental level to have a better policy to offer us a research environment to promote mathematics. Want to keep you. So I want to thank you very much for your attention. Okay. Jinhua, I think I'm on time.
Yeah, so fantastic. I actually saved 3 minutes roughly.
Okay.
I overused. I really enjoyed your book on the public understanding of mathematics. That is really I'm trying to read it through. It's really hard. I know that a lot of big guys, they comment on mathematics in their own way. It's really a public outreach. Fantastic. So you mentioned a lot of good stuff. We need new mathematics for artificial intelligence, brain science, machine learning, data analysis. For the need cross-disciplinary. That is very tough. Okay. The problem is that according to academic arrangement, according to the assessment, policy and system, very often they don't recognize. You see, it's very tough. Also, overpressure. I guess that is also a challenge faced by a lot of the mathematicians in other countries. So thank you again in taking your valuable time. I know that you're attending the 2 National Academy of Sciences General Assembly. It's very kind of you. Well,
okay,
thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and let's move to the next speaker, and Professor Zhou Zuoyu, Vice President of Beijing Normal University. Beijing Normal University is also a member of the Alliance of International, Science Organization. And I have to say that that indicates that ANSO is not just an organization within CES. Let's say we have also members, from other, Chinese institutions, including industrial partners. So his topic is consolidate fundamental science educations towards driven development. So Professor Zhou, a PhD in education and vice president at the university in charge of international collaboration, educations, and continuous education. I guess maybe innovation. So and also he was a senior Fulbright scholar, and worked and advanced training in UCLA and Stanford. Stanford is the place where you got a lot of training for innovation. So Professor Zhou, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jinhua Chao, and dear Vice President Florence Huldax, Vice President Kenzie Zhang, dear colleagues and distinguished dear guests. It's my great pleasure to participate in this forum. I want to thank Professor Yuan Xiang for your wonderful startup talks and the presentation for the whole forum. Mathematics is the basics of the basic science, so it is quite important. Our university lay the emphasis on the basic research and the basic disciplines, especially for mathematics and also the other natural sciences and humanities. I think we have met formally, and I hope maybe someday we could invite Professor Yuan to collaborate with our colleagues at the Beijing Normal. So for me, I want to share my the experiences on the basis of Beijing Normal University, especially for the education. So how to bring basic research, basic disciplinaries, and also the education. So that is a big issue for our whole university. And I also think that is a critical issue for the whole world, the research and education. I will figure out 3 points related to this issue. The first, I will try to trace back to the significance of basic disciplinaries and the research. And the second, I will mention the state policies and also our university measures we have taken to solidify our basic research. And thirdly, about the challenges we are facing for the basic research. The first one is about the significance of basic research. I will ask 3 very critical questions for us to think about. The question is related to the 4 relations. The first relation is about the relations between so-called fundamental research and applied research. How can we balance that? Now, what the key is for that? The answer is there would be no great applied research production without forgetting the application. Application is one of the drives to engage the scientists in the scientific work, but we should never forget the significance of the inner motivation out of the interest of the scientists. So the very deep drive is from the interest, the curiosity. The second is about the relations between the 2 cultures among humanities and the sciences, as C.P. Snow defined and termed. We know that natural sciences and social sciences and humanities have different communities and also different ethos and paradigms. But on the other hand, there is one paradigm to think about, how to come across the boundaries in between the 3 sectors, especially for the 2 cultures. That is very important. I think the answer is that the worldwide human being is one, even though we have diversified cultural bonds and traditions. We could not discuss about the scientific research well without recognizing our natural essence as human beings. We must reflect the mindset of man-made boundaries between research on humanities and sciences. So STEMs is very important, but the humanities are also very important. So interdisciplinary dialogues and cooperation are really needed to deal with the vital human problems and the natural quandaries. The third, the relationship between the scientists and the science entrepreneurs. Traditionally, the university bore the image of ivory tower. The illusion has been disenchanted during the past century. The former hermits of the ivory tower now play the critical role in economic and social development, especially in the knowledge economy time and the digital era. The boundary between the university and the market is blurred. The involvement of the technology and economic innovation is not condescending taste of scientists, but a new ethos of scientific landscape. But even though scientific entrepreneurs are welcomed in the market, it does not mean the drawbacks should not be kept on our guard, as Sailor Slaughter and Larry Leslie reminded us. The fourth, the key basic question is the statement out of date, say knowledge for its own sake. So the challenges Professor Yuan has mentioned, I think that is a very, very important question. What, for what, or why we are doing research? Or what's the main purpose of the basic research? We know that it does not mean necessarily that we have to give up the traditional value of a cutting-edge knowledge production idea to meet the current challenges. On the contrary, we should put the highest value first. The fundamental science has the fundamental principle, which is knowledge for the human well-being and happiness. Therefore, we embrace knowledge value adding as the key principle to the academic community, to the state, and to the international community. The relations between knowledge creation and the knowledge value creation share the same mission. So when we discuss about the basic research or the fundamental research, fundamental disciplines, we should not forget what is the basics. Humanities, social sciences, natural sciences share the same mission. We should do better for our future. Basic science is the theoretical basis of scientific research. Research on the basic science is the source of breakthrough in key core technologies. As for basic science education, it is an important cornerstone for innovative talent training. The universities are the main basis for basic science education. So I will come down to my the second point about the education, what the policy of our country and how Beijing Normal University follows the guidelines and the policies to lay the emphasis and to support the basic research or basic disciplines. When we realize the importance though of basic research, China takes measures in cultivating talents in basic science towards innovation-driven development. From 1990, more than 100 national bases for basic science research have been established, as well as national basic science talent training funds. In addition, two important plans, National Experimental Plan for cultivating top students in basic disciplines and National Plan for strengthening basic disciplines are implemented to cultivate talents in the field of basic science. That is our national policy. Let me explain or introduce our university experience. Beijing Normal University has always been following closely with the pace of the worldwide and national education trend at the forefront of training top talents in basic disciplines. We attach great importance to the talent cultivation in basic disciplines and get remarkable achievements by effective methods. But we know we still have our difficulties to overcome. Since 1990s, 7 of our disciplines have been selected into national basis for basic science research and teaching talents. It is a little bit long phrase. And the national basis for talents training and scientific research in basic arts disciplines. We have established Li Yun Science Experimental Class since 2001 and Experimental Class for Economics since 2009. Since the implementation of the National Experimental Plan for cultivating top students in basic disciplines in 2009, our university has 10 Li Yun top students cultivating program based on mathematics, geography, psychology, Chinese language and literature, history, physics, chemistry, biological science, philosophy, and economics. Since 2020, we have started the National Experimental Plan for cultivating top students in basic disciplines 2.0. In order to ensure the effectiveness of a top student plan, our university has developed and implemented Li Yun pilot program for cultivating top students in basic disciplines. since the beginning of the 2010 undergraduate phase. During the implementation of the program, we explored tutorial system and individualized small class and internationalized features, reformed training mode, innovated management system, equipped with first-class teachers, provide first-class conditions for the study. In May 2020, on the 10th anniversary of the implementation of the top student plan, the Chinese Ministry of Education announced the winners of 4 honorary awards. When Beijing Normal University won the Typical Case Award, the Outstanding Contribution Award, the Outstanding Supervisor Award, and Outstanding Management Award. Those awards kind of policy-oriented programs and mechanisms. Based on the experience of one system with 3 features, that means supervisor system, small size class, internationalization, and individualization, and other effective training models explored in the top student plan. Our university was selected to launch the National Plan for Strengthening Basic Disciplines in 2020. The plan is to implement the 4-in-1 model of a solid foundation, cross-discipline, integration of science education, and articulation of undergraduate and graduate studies for top innovative talents training, exploring the construction of perfect training program for transitions from bachelor, master to doctoral students to doctoral degrees, focusing on the national major strategy and the key core technology fields, providing reserve talents for such fields where talents are urgently needed. Our university also takes advantage of the basic disciplines and cultivating excellent teaching talents in basic disciplines. As one of the 6 teacher training universities under the Ministry of Education, our university educated a total of 16,079 teaching talents, covering basic disciplines such as mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, geography, history, to secondary education institutions nationwide since the pilot implementation of free education for teacher training students in 2007. So I want to explain the free teacher education program. So our program for the students who want to be future teachers, the government waived the tuition fees for those students. For the STEM development, our university suits 2 missions. One is for the basic research, and then the other try to prepare the future teachers for the basic education students. So I want to share our thinking about the challenges next step, the dilemmas and the challenges in the development of basic science education in our country. Although the talent training in basic discipline is showing the results, there are still dilemmas and the challenges in the development of basic science education in our country. The first one, the innovative talent education the training system needs to be further strengthened. The cultivation of students' innovative consciousness and creative abilities is not possible without education in basic disciplines. We will strengthen the construction of basic disciplines, set up disciplines related to basic research, and cross-discipline, attract the best students to devote themselves to basic research, strengthen the training of undergraduates in basic disciplines, and explore the training model for successive undergraduate, postgraduate, and PhD students in basic disciplines. The second, construction of widely shared teaching and learning support system needs to be processed urgently. It is important to build a national-wide shared teaching support system to share high-quality teaching resources, promote the development of teaching and learning reform, and plays roles of demonstration and radiation for the development of basic science. Third, the management model of basic researches and teaching teams in universities require reform and innovation. In the process of cultivating basic science talents, the in-depth reform of curriculum and individualized training of students have put forward higher requirements for teachers. The strengthening of basic research in universities and the development of novel research-oriented universities require the full mobilization of teachers' enthusiasms to devote themselves to education and research in basic disciplines and demand us to explore a series of reform and innovation initiatives, such as establishing a fair and effective assessment system and formulating targeted incentive policies. Fourth, collaborative training system and international scientific and technological cooperation both need to be improved. Promoting cooperation between schools and enterprises, combining teaching and research, and building a 4-in-1 training system of professional education, academic training, scientific research, and vocational practice requires the active participation and the full cooperation of various social entities such as universities, enterprises, and research institutions such as the Triple Helix. At the same time, we shall promote international scientific and technological exchanges and cooperation with more open thinking and initiatives. Advance the exchange and the cooperation in the cultivation of talents and scientific research in basic disciplines. And finally, build a community of shared future for mankind. Based on decades of exploration, we have accumulated a valuable practice experience in tailoring the training of basic research and basic science. With continuous efforts from all sides, I believe, and I hope we could get further improvements in talent cultivation and international cooperation. So with training the talents and lay the emphasis on the education of the basic research students, I think we are really working very hard to make the basics basic. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Okay, Professor Zhou, for your very comprehensive presentation, in consolidating fundamental science, educate towards innovation-driven development, and obviously, from your suggestions, we can see, some of the challenges faced, by the Beijing Normal University and much beyond, and well, again, we have some questions and later on for discussion. Thank you again. Let's move on. That our next presentation is the dynamics of transnational knowledge generation and transfer lessons from Singapore. So the presentation will be delivered by two speakers, and one speaker is Belis Gulas, the other one is Sir George Reda. And I know that they prepared a little video. They will play that. Let me, give a little bit further information about the two speakers. So, Belis Gulas, President Chair in Translational Neuroscience, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, and Professor, President Chair, of the Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, and he spent most of his scientific career at Karolinska Institute, Stockholm, Sweden, very famous research institute, and where he's still a professor. And so the other speaker is Sir George Reda, and a former professor of the University of Oxford, a former chairman by Medical Research Council, Singapore, a British biochemist of Hungarian origin, educated at the University of Oxford. And so Professor has outstanding contributions in using spectroscopy methods, including NMR, to study complex biological materials. And he was the first researcher in the world to introduce the use of NMR to study tissue metabolites, and a game changer in that particular field. Without further ado, let us play that lecture video.
Ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Singapore. My name is Balázs Gulyás, and I'm a professor of neuroscience at Singapore's Nanyang Technological University. This presentation is a result of several discussions with one of my mentors, Professor Sir George Rudder in Oxford, who for many years was the inaugural chairman of Singapore's Biomedical Research Council, and in this capacity, one of the architects of Singapore's science policy. The organizers of the present workshop have asked us to share with you our insights about the dynamics of transnational knowledge generation and knowledge transfer, using Singapore as an example. Being co-travelers in Singapore's science policy journey, we both have our skin in the game, and thus we are sharing with you not only observations seen and analyzed by outsiders, but we also share with you our personal insights and hands-on experience. In the next few minutes, we would like to familiarize you with the history and main strategic concepts of Singapore's science policy, or as it is referred to nowadays, research, innovation, and enterprise, or RIE policies. Also, we would like to give insights into the recent features of knowledge generation and knowledge transfer in Singapore. Based on the analysis of the measurable outcomes of Singapore's science policies, and by comparing it with other models of science policies in the world, we would like to draw a few conclusions and propose a new knowledge policy model. In the interest of time, uniformity, and simplicity, we will use the term science policy throughout the presentation to cover the wider terms of science, research and technology policy, research and development policy, research, innovation and enterprise policy, and other related terms. Modern Singapore's foundation goes back to the beginning of the 19th century, when Sir Stamford Raffles established a British trading post on the island in 1818. The Republic of Singapore is a young democracy, founded in 1965, when the state of Singapore, one of the constituent states of Malaysia, became an independent country under the charismatic leadership of Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew. Geographically, Singapore is a small island of 728 square kilometers at the tip of the Malay Peninsula, 110 kilometers north of the equator. It has 5.7 million inhabitants, of which approximately 2.6 million are citizens. The country has a multi-ethnic population comprising 76% Chinese, 15% Malay, and 8% Tamil ethnicities. The official languages are English, Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil. The per capita GDP in 2021 is estimated to be $102,000, with this value being number 2 after Luxembourg in the world. The origins of Singapore's science policy goes back to the mid-80s, when Sidney Brenner, the Nobel laureate biologist behind discoveries like the messenger RNA, the triplets in the DNA code, or the C. elegans model, and who died in Singapore on the 5th of April 2019, met Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew for the first time and proposed to him the establishment of a research institute, similar to LMB, the Laboratory for Molecular Biology in Cambridge. Prime Minister Lee was skeptical and replied, "Dr. Brenner, Singapore needs not science, but technologies, and thus we need technicians and not scientists." Sydney, with his acerbic wit, replied, "Then, Prime Minister, you will remain a country of technicians forever." This argument convinced Prime Minister Lee about the importance of science in the life of a country and laid the foundations of Singapore's science policy. In October 1990, the National Science and Technology Board Bill was tabled to Parliament, and the enactment of the National Science and Technology Board Act took place the following month. Following the establishment of the National Science and Technology Board in 1991 and the first 5-year plan regarding the country's science and technology policy. This plan was followed by similar 5-year plans between 1996 and today, and parallel with all these 5-year plans, the background institutions and mechanisms were also established and developed. The key decision-making body for Singapore's research, innovation and enterprise policy is the Research, Innovation and Enterprise Council, led by the Prime Minister and assisted by the National Research Foundation. The RIEC consists of cabinet ministers and some major stakeholders of the country's academic, research and business operations. Of the ministries, the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Trade and Industry play a key role with their programs and institutions. The Ministry of Education is supervising the universities and some major grant schemes. Between 2000 and 2009, 4 new universities were added to the already existing universities, the National University of Singapore and Nanyang Technological University. And the universities were given autonomous status. The 6 autonomous universities of Singapore educate more than 100,000 students. The 2 older universities belong to the best universities of the world, NUS being number 11 and NTU being number 13 in the present QS World Ranking of Universities. The Ministry of Trade and Industry is another key player, supervising the country's Agency for Science, Technology and Research, or A*STAR, and 2 relevant government agencies, the Economic Development Board and Enterprise Singapore. Other ministries, like the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Defense, contribute to the research landscape of the country with area-specific programs and research institutions. Singapore's present Research, Innovation and Enterprise 2025 plan has 4 major focuses: manufacturing, trade and connectivity, urban solutions and sustainability, human health and potential, and smart nation and digital economy. These areas are supported by mission-oriented research activities, which consume 26% of the plan's total budget of 26 billion Singapore dollars, whereas the rest of the budget is supporting the further development of core research capabilities in universities and A*STAR research institutes, dedicated innovation and enterprise activities, talent development, and new programs in response to unforeseen future needs and emerging opportunities. The critically important feature of the RIE 2025 is its mission-orientedness. Research, innovation, and enterprise should focus on the needs of society, the people's and the country's social, economical development. Now let's turn to the main outcomes or key performance indicators of Singapore's science policy. Parallel with the unfolding of Singapore's research, innovation, and enterprise landscape, Singapore's main input and output indicators quickly reached those of the world's leading scientific powers, and in some cases, Singapore became world leader in some areas by the late 2000s, as shown in the right-hand panel, including number of researchers per population, university-company research collaboration, or high-tech exports. During the 2010s, as shown in the left lower panel, the proportion of high-end scientific publications has also reached the level of the best countries in the field. Up to 19% of the scientific publications from Singapore falls into the highly cited category. Regarding the key achievements and value capture in the innovation ecosystem, the formally outlined science policy has produced spectacular results, including the facts that Singapore has become the most innovative nation in the Asia-Pacific region and the fourth largest exporter in the world of high-tech products by 2017, or the facts that 4% of Singapore's GDP came from the pharma, bio, and medtech sectors in 2019, whereas 20.9% of the GDP came from manufacturing, primarily high-tech manufacturing, in the same year. All this was the result of, among others, a significant increase in R&D spending by both government and private sector, the growth of annual venture capital investment, and the significant support to high-tech startups by the government. Despite the magnificent developments in Singapore during the past 30 years, and the resulting positive relationship between the country's innovation policies and development, as shown in the left panel, there still appears to be a spurious disconnect between the country's innovation input and output measures, as shown in the right panel. According to the Global Innovation Index, in 2020, Singapore was one of the most outstanding countries in the world, regarding its Global Innovation Index being number 8 among the countries. However, the conundrum is the following: whereas regarding input measures, such as financial inputs into the innovation system or institutional and manpower backgrounds of the system, Singapore was number 1 in the world. Regarding innovation outputs, indicated by statistics on patents, publications, innovation disclosures, and so on, Singapore was only on place 15 among the countries. Why is this disconnect? If we have a closer look at some of the indicators behind the Global Innovation Index, we have to realize some peculiarities which may lie behind the formerly mentioned disconnect between the input and output measures of Singapore's innovation efficacy. On this figure, you see the components of the Global Innovation Index. On the left-hand side, the so-called input components, the institutions, the infrastructural background, investment in human capital and R&D, the sophistication of market and business. On the right-hand side, the output components, creative outputs, knowledge outputs, technology outputs. The formally observed difference between the input side, where Singapore is world best, and the output side, where Singapore is number 15, raises questions and begs for an explanation. We have noticed a challenge. Despite the marvelous development in Singapore's research policy in the past decades, there is a gap between the input and output sides of the knowledge generation and transfer equation. The question is the following: are these challenges related to the methodology, the approach which we use when analyzing the knowledge generation and transfer mechanisms, time management. Namely, Singapore is still in an early phase of these processes, and in a few more years, things will be fine. Structural issues. Further fine-tuning of the structures and mechanisms are still needed. Or conceptual questions, which are related to the models applied. Instead of giving a detailed analysis of each of these opportunities, which in fact we have performed, we would like to give you our conclusion in the next slides. We argue that at the deepest level of the conundrum, there is a conceptual question. Are the recently existing science policy models offering an optimal solution for the challenges ahead of us in the fields of science, technology, and innovation in the 21st century? Or can we do something better by adjusting the models to the earlier unforeseen needs and expectations of our society? At present, we can observe two dominant science policy models in the world. One is the classical science policy model, the origin of which can be traced back to the first half of the 20th century, and its first clear formulation can be found in Vannevar Bush's landmark publication of 1944, Science, the Endless Frontier. In the post-World War II years, Vannevar Bush's influence on the implication of this model was definitely positive in various ways. It gave impetus to application-oriented research, not only in the fields of military applications, but also in medicine, public health, civil engineering, and so on. Also, it elevated the academic status of applied research activities to the level of basic research activities, and the two, basic and applied, were juxtaposed to each other as twins or as complementary left and right sides of the same body. More recently, during the past decades, some rapidly developing countries, the tiger countries, including Singapore, favored a more goal-oriented approach. Science policy should prioritize solutions for society-oriented research, and its main objective is to contribute to the social economic development of a country. The basic research versus applied research model is still the prevailing model worldwide, including the model's most important protagonist, the US. And some recent developments in the US suggest that the model is resilient to changes. The two new acts by the US House of Representatives and the Senate, the Future Act and the Endless Frontier Act, if approved, will not only preserve the division between basic and applied research, but may even increase the bureaucratic landscape by establishing and beefing up new agencies and organizations. In the Solutions for Society-oriented research model, the drivers come from the challenges and needs of society and from the aspirations and objectives of the government. The country's science policy should focus on finding solutions for the economy, the healthcare system, the country's defense and security challenges, and so on. Singapore's recent Research, Innovation and Enterprise, or RIE 2025 plan, is an outstanding example of this model. A SWOT analysis of the two models indicate clearly the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of each model. Such an analysis on its own may clarify the model's various advantages or disadvantages, but don't say too much about their success in real-life scenarios. Such an analysis can be based on various indicators, including the number of scientific publications per capita, the number of IP per capita, or the Global Innovation Index. In fact, all converge on a similar pattern, which is probably most clearly shown by the latter one, the Global Innovation Index. when one tries to analyze which country's science policy model is closer to one of the two major models, we can conclude that among the first 15 best performing countries or systems, 5, including China and Hong Kong, one country, two systems, are predominantly preferring the solutions for society model. All these countries have a very young history in the field of science policy, and for them, this model was the key for success, which skyrocketed them into the science and technology world powers within a few decades. The question is, can we do it even better? Analyzing the advantages and disadvantages of the existing science policy models, their applications by different countries, and the resulting outcome measures, we conclude that the most relevant features of the future science policy should have the following characteristics. It should not be based on the basic research versus applied research division, and there should be no dispute whether it is basic or applied, as there is an irreversible link between the two. It should focus on important scientific questions, important for society, and should lead to discovery and application hand in hand, as the priorities and drivers of the research agenda should be identical. And it should enlarge humankind's knowledge base and offer vital solutions for society at the same time. In other words, we propose that the effective science policy strategy of the 21st century should not be based on the artificial division between basic research versus applied research concepts, and should also surpass the solution for society only approach. It should identify important questions, whether basic or applied, questions which are important for both science and society. The new science policy's priorities and drivers for science and society should congrue. Research efforts should mobilize simultaneously exploratory, translational, and application-oriented resources. The explorations should be deep-going, and the outcome of the explorations should offer solutions to society in important questions, while at the same time, the research should increase humankind's knowledge base. A brilliant example for all this is Katalin Karikó's research, who during her 4-decade-long scientific career tackled and solved an important basic science question, which, thanks to her visionary insights, became vitally important in humankind's recent fight against the COVID pandemics. This type of research should motivate science policy stakeholders and decision makers in the future to amend the recently prevailing models for the benefit of both science and society. Köszönjük a figyelmet. Xie, thank you for your attention.
Yeah, well, I have to give my very high compliments to the two speakers, even though that they can't hear me, you know. Oh, you are there, great, you know. That's a very comprehensive elaboration of the Singapore science policy that includes all aspects, you know, also the two models. And I don't know whether you were here when I make the initial introduction. I said that, you know, fundamental science versus innovation. So very often that you chase the problems that actually, you know, leads to the advances of science. And also, of course, you know, and you promote the basic science, you know, that also that it promotes innovations, you know, vice versa. Nevertheless, that, you know, for a province, the full small tigers, Asia, for instance, they're relatively small, and they can use the mission-oriented. But for big country like US and China, that'll be a different story. But we'll come back and discuss those fascinating issues when all the presentations accomplished. Thank you very much. Excellent. So Professor Jan, your turn to take the floor. Thank you very much.
Wonderful presentation, and I would like to compliment the previous presenters and speakers, but as time doesn't permit talking more about it at this stage, so we go to the next one, and that is we will be now waiting to listen to Professor Xiaobo Lai. He's co-chair of Methodology of Science Education Academia Europaea, Budapest Knowledge Hub, distinguished visiting professor, Department of Cognitive Science, Central European University. The topic of his talk is tensions between the value systems of managers and basic science, the case of Hungary. But before I invite him to speak, let me talk a little more about him. Professor Paya is a psychologist and linguist. He is a member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences and of the Academia Europaea. He's been engaged in cross-linguistic studies of languages, processing and language development and issues of development languages disorders, the impact of new ICT and human cognition. He taught and worked at several European universities and in the United States universities. And among them, of course, is the great Stanford University. He's currently visiting researcher at the Central European University, Budapest. I request him to kindly make his presentation, please.
So I am in a difficult situation anyway, because I have to speak after the very challenging, inspiring presentation of Professors Gulyás and Rada. And I'm also going to talk mainly about things that have been mentioned already by several speakers yesterday, like Professor Halász and Vada, and today not only by Professors Gulyás and Rada, but also by Professor Yuan when he was characterizing, Professor Zhu, I'm sorry, when he was characterizing the issue of we shouldn't see any sort of separation between two cultures and science and so on. I'm going to present my short talk as a footnote from a small country where all these tensions between fundamental or basic research and immediately applied research also show up in the governance of science policy. As I've been on the scientific field for over half a century, I remember that some of the tensions I'm going to mention are familiar for us from the international scene, from the science politics of Presidents Ronald Reagan and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. So there is nothing new in the tension between two different approaches to science and innovation. Next one, please. Actually, I'm presenting in this chart two different attitudes to science and innovation. One attitude promoted by people who are claiming autonomous science as being crucial for the development of modern society, and managers as two paradigms. On the left chart, you see Albert Einstein and the laboratory scene, the sort of Pasteurian scene mentioned yesterday by Professor Halász. And on the right side, you see Nikola Tesla and the managerial mind that is having sort of charts, statistics, and so on. As a matter of fact, as a footnote, let me mention that Tesla, otherwise for the historians of technology and science, is a very interesting, keen example that innovation is many times conditioned by the meeting and clashes or combinations of different cultures. By the time Nikola Tesla was convinced to go to the United States by Edison, he already experienced 6 different cultures in Europe. He was the son of an Orthodox Serbian Pope living in Croatia, that's the second culture, studying in high school in Graz, southern Austria, having his first paid job in Budapest, Hungary, then studying at the Technical University in Prague, and moving to Paris. And it was Paris where Edison recruited him. Anyway, going back to the chart. So the traditional prototype of autonomous scientist is looking for pure knowledge. She or he is curiosity driven. As a footnote, I should say that the danger of society-driven research showed in the last chart of Professor Gulyás and Rada was that curiosity-driven research and the curiosity as a motivation is a little bit challenged in the new world. I really believe that this shouldn't be challenged. And it's actually based on internal competition of scientists, but at the same time, it needs certain security. It is aiming to comprehensive knowledge of the world and the human world. And most importantly, it is treating money and other resources as instruments, while the managerial approach is treating money and resources as goals. It's looking for local, not local in the geographic sense, but local in the solution sense. Solutions, it is usually interest-driven, and it is claiming for useful knowledge. Next one, please. Now, within Hungary today, there are actually the entire issue, this traditional tension between curiosity-driven basic research and immediately research bringing immediately applicable results is making more colorful by a combination of 2 types of logics, a centralization logic and the corporate logic. There is a tension in science policy between the managerial mentality, which is looking for decentralization, and the value control mentality of science policy, which is looking for centralization. That's a sort of a built-in tension within the societal governing forces. And there is a lot of change introduced that tries to combine centralization with privatization. One example is the still ongoing privatization of most of the university system, which I refer to not only mockingly as pseudo-privatization, pseudo in the sense that there is no buyer, privatization without a buyer. Next slide, please. Now, in the intervention routes in science policy that are much debated in Hungary are 2 sorts. There are structural centralized intervention. One example was the reorganization of the management system and the sort of social belongingness of the research institutes of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, where we are seated now. Then in the university system, about 11 years ago, the introduction of a centrally nominated chancellor system. The chancellors were legally still responsible for the financial running of the state-owned university organization, but at the same time, they gradually started to have some voice over the programs of the universities. And then there is this pseudo-privatization as a next step going on recently. Then there are occasion-based, less systematic intervention, where there are many ideologically driven conflicts between universities and the governments, such as issues of studying migration processes and the gender issues and teaching, and the tensions over Central European University, the reorganization of the University of Theatre, and so on. And also, last, there were several times ministerial-based interventions into science funding. Next one, please. If you look at the chart proposed by Fielden about the status of public universities, but I would sort of generalize it as an institutional governance issue of government-based science and higher education funding. The two arrows indicate a move towards independence, that's the blue, and a move towards more centralization, that's the red. And it's a much debated issue, but Hungary is moving between B and C at the moment. Next slide, please. As a Sociology of Education survey a few years ago by Mr. Hegedűs and Polonyi has shown, that was before the big changes like the pseudo-privatization I mentioned now, between 1994 and 2014, so 20 years, as the red colors always see lack of autonomy, the green colors show persistence or presence of autonomy. As you can see, there is a partial control over the content of higher education. There is no control over hiring policies, yes, and it's questionable how the salaries are controlled or not. But in any way, what you see is that over the 25 years of Hungary being part of the so-called modern capitalist world, there's an increasing centralization and less autonomy in many aspects of university life. Next one, please. The new value system promoted by the managerial attitude is trying to promote applied sciences at universities. This appears in higher education policy, in the emergency of newly established, strictly applied universities, and then a lot of political and public discussion on the role of independent research institutes and questioning their independence. The next one, please. The left chart shows data from the National Bureau of Statistics on the number of employees in different sectors of R&D. The green and red lines are research development institutes and universities. There is hardly any change. And the blue lines are hirings in companies. You can see that actually the role of employment of researchers is skyrocketing in companies, while rather stable and not really changing in universities and independent research institutes. The right side is just a sort of impressionistic chart showing what happened from the 1970s, from the time of the still sort of centralized communist Hungary to the recent times. And you can see the green line shows that between 1980 and the early 2000s, the free competition for research money with no titles or no topics assigned was increasing, while in the last 15 years it's decreasing. And the red line shows that in the last 10 years, the number of labeled, specifically allocated research money is increasing. That sort of shows the financial dangers of curiosity-driven independent research. Next slide, please. Of course, in a small country like Hungary, there are many specific issues that the managerial mentality might raise regarding basic research. One issue is, and that's our argument for the importance of basic research. A small country like Hungary is not in a position, and it shall never be a position, it could simply buy knowledge. The managerial attitude say, but it cannot afford the sort of creation of basic knowledge. We really believe, many of us in the science environment, that we either, both for preparation of teachers for the next generation, we have seen a Chinese presentation about the talent programs. Hungarian Academy is launching also a new talent programs, the alumnus program that is trying to do that, but not only for that, but also for preparation of applied researchers. Basic research and autonomy is always continues to be crucial. Next slide, please. There is, of course, tensions within the academic world. There are tensions that we in the academic world are partly looking for competition, favoring selection, and there are many exclusion processes that historically may lead to new disciplines or new developments. Think of the history of experimental psychology, my own field, or psychoanalysis. They were born, everybody knows the personal saga of Sigmund Freud. He was over 40 years and still didn't have a full professorship of the university. So what did he do? He developed a new field of science and so on. And then there is the other possible issue, the extension of domains where too broad areas appear, and there is a need for specification. Like in Hungary, Albert Szent-Györgyi, the Nobel Prize winner, was the first one who established a curriculum of biochemistry, independent of physiology, to show that physiology has become too broad a domain at the university. And similarly, there is over the tensions, a meeting of domains becomes possible. That's how neuroscience or cognitive science were born. Next slide, please. And so that's sort of claiming my credo. On the right side, you can see the image of human knowledge process proposed by Karl Popper and his followers in evolutionary epistemology, basically claim that we have to endorse and make sure in our social politics to have enough knowledge variation, because knowledge variation is the process by which social selection and social relevance can appear. So we have to always make sure in science policy to promote open minds, which is leading to open science. Next slide, please. And as a message, I strongly want to claim that humans are inclined towards intellectual freedom and they are driven by curiosity. So the challenge outlined by Professors Gulyás and Rada should really seriously be met. In experimental psychology from the 1950s on, we claim that curiosity is an extremely central value for primate life and for human life. Then in this process, in knowledge acquisition, there is a built-in hypothesis testing background. And in order for hypothesis testing to work, you have to have many proposed hypotheses. And therefore, creating variation is extremely important as a part of human nature and as a crucial aspect of human nature as a part of running science. Therefore, I'm trying to claim we really have to support basic science that supports variation and fosters real novelty. And then the last slide, please. Thank you for your attention. Yeah.
This was a wonderful presentation, not only on Hungary, but also in general context. Professor, we are thankful to you. And I enjoyed the last bit of your these lessons learned or advices that you had, in addition to a very nice presentation elsewhere. That is that your strong support for basic sciences and also for intellectual freedom and the hypothesis of testing and creation of variation as part of the human nature. I think that we would not discuss it any further at this stage, but obviously in later part there would be perhaps more for you to illuminate us with. Thank you, sir. Okay, we now go to the next speaker, and the next speaker is Professor Alejandro Joffre Caceres. He's a provost at the University of Chile. The topic of his presentation is transdisciplinary and collaboration, key elements for integration of basic and applied science through knowledge mobilization. Professor is principal researcher at the Center for Mathematical Modeling, and he's an invited professor. He has been invited professor at universities in USA and Europe, including the universities of Paris, Sorbonne, and several others, such as Davis, California. He has been associate editor of several journals of mathematics and engineering, and also a member of a large number of international committees related to the area of regulation, energy optimization, and mathematics in the industry. I request Professor Alejandro to make his presentation, please.
Thank you very much for your introduction. The title of my talk today is Transdisciplinary and Collaboration, Key Elements for the Integration of Basic and Applied Science through Knowledge Mobilization. In Latin American universities, the universities have played the role of building cranes to create new nations in the first half of the 19th century. Since then, the university in Latin America have a disproportionate prominence within the new states in the areas such as health. In most of our country, that the health system have been built from the university, in education, in technologies, and for example, in informatics, is still today, the .cl domain belongs to the University of Chile. More of the law system have been created also in the university, politics, and so we have a cultural endeavor to a disproportionate extent as compared to other latitude. This is true even today. Until today, we have this big influence of the university in the States. So I would like to talk a bit about transdisciplinary conceptual framework. As you know, at the first international interdisciplinary seminar, co-supported by OECD in the 70s, the goal of transdisciplinary was defined as establishing a common system of actions for a set of discipline that transcend the limited scope of global disciplinary views through a general synthesis. At the time of Morin, the philosopher Edgar Morin, French, did not give a definition of transdisciplinary. For him, it was a kind of messenger of the freedom of thinking and go between disciplines. In 1985, Julie Klein proposed the inclusion of the meaning of beyond disciplines. And the Charter of Transdisciplinary was adopted by participants at the First World Congress of Transdisciplinary in Portugal in 1994. Some characteristics of the transdisciplinary looks for trespassing disciplines frontiers in order to create knowledge that goes beyond the mere sum of them. Another characteristic is required to integrate multi-actors that come across different fields and from outside academia, permitting knowledge mobilization. And another characteristic is a problem focus, which characterize transdisciplinarity. These three characteristics above allowed the development of broader diagnosis, the co-construction of knowledge, for example, and the build of solutions to wicked problems considering the specific territorial qualities. Methodologically talking, transdisciplinary work needs university to think themselves in a different manner, especially regarding their our discipline-oriented administrative structure, which is one of the characteristics of the university, at least in Latin America. This opens new opportunities for the integration of basic and applied research with knowledge mobilization and innovation. Here you can see, if you think in terms of example of a transdisciplinary challenge like climate change or digital society or sustainable economic development are all transdisciplinary challenges. And this, what usually you have in this dynamic, you have the transdisciplinary allows to find gaps in basic and applied research. If you think you have in mind any of these challenges, like for example, climate change, you see clearly that transdisciplinary allows to find gaps in basic and applied research. So that dynamic interaction then is develop new knowledge and then allowing building input for the development of solution for some specific wicked problems. So in this interaction dynamic, I will show you one example, that recent example that we have in Santiago, the capital of Chile. We are then building there in a park, the big park, 1,000 hectares. The idea of this transdisciplinary, but driven by the many very important and challenge problem for the country. Then in the University of Chile Karen Park we are building sustainable development for Chile. In that place, you see here it's not far from the city. It's only 20 kilometers from the city. It's between the Santiago and the airport of Santiago. And then you have here a view of this place. We have, as I mentioned, 1,000 hectares of projecting an ecosystem of innovation. Then what are the goals for this? Then the first is promoting transdisciplinary. And today we are in Chile at a decisive moment within the history of the country. And why? Because we are building a new constitution. Maybe you read about in the news, and Chile is entered a few days ago in a process of building a new constitution. And it's clear that building a new constitution is a very good example of a transdisciplinary, right? So promoting transdisciplinarity is one of the goals of this Karen Park, reinforcing the relation with other state entities, promoting innovation and relation with enterprises, creating a hub for public university system, promoting internationalization, and promoting engagement with society through different actions like museum, exhibition, and so on. Innovation ecosystem, we in this 1,000 hectare, 800 are reserved, allocated for environmental reserve, and then 200 for technological, social innovation. What we have so far, we have these 4 centers, and one focus on food technology, another one looking in new technology for building, and a third building oriented to material science, testing material science, and in another one called Edificio Vínculo, which means a building for connecting different disciplines. So that we have now, and then we are now in a way of constructing new centers there. What are the new centers? Well, one is a technology center focused on this idea of transdisciplinary and big challenges for Chile. The technological center is focused on 5G pilot center in connection with the public and private sector. Another, in the same building, we have in this transdisciplinary idea, telemedicine and industry computing facilities. We are mixing art, engineering, design in a big center around virtualization, immersive virtualization, and also at the same time in the same building we have planning a museum focused on Darwin. You know that Darwin part of his trip around the world was spent some years in Chile, and some of he said that some of the idea was about evolution were created during his stay in Chile, and so we are creating here a museum focused on Darwin, using all this immersive virtualization technology. Another aspect of this challenge for the country is the solar energy. We have lucky that to have a huge source of solar energy because of the specific radiation characteristic in the north of Chile. We have a huge solar sources, and then we are now planning a new center only focused on the solar energy and electromobility. That also, of course, that create links with different disciplines, engineering and mathematics, physics. And a third center there is going to be a vaccine production facility and a biotechnological center, very focused on these new challenges that we have because of the pandemic. At the same time, we are creating this place, a school, experimental school, for the people there living close to this area, and but with with this idea that the students from the very beginning they are training on this transdisciplinary view of the education of the disciplines. So we are, this idea of transdisciplinary is everywhere in this current place, and we expect to have around 2,500 people working there very soon. So it's going to be one of the nice places to work in Chile if you want to come here. Okay, Karen means always green, siempre verde in Spanish. Thank you very much.
Alejandro, it was very impressive talk. I was really enjoying your emphasis on transdisciplinary, where mathematics, basic sciences, applied sciences, management, social sciences, problems of the country, they all ultimately converge at this transdisciplinary type of domain. I was also amused to know more about your institution, this academic institution, CARN, and the type of activities and disciplines and the centers that you have established. I would like to compliment you and that we will listen more from you at the end of today's talk. Thank you. Okay, we now go to Professor Anwarul Hasan Gilani. He will be talking on bridging the gap between basic and applied sciences using translation research. A case study at Aga Khan University in Pakistan. Professor Gilani has 40 years experience of academia and scientific administration, along with strategic planning. Before I talk anything else, let me say it with great pleasure. He's not only a friend, but he's also the leading scientist in the domain of pharmacy in Pakistan. Published and both applied as well as basic research, and he is a good example of that. Professor Gilani made breakthrough discoveries in areas of natural medicines and conducted translational studies. He published large number of papers, has very high number of citations, has mentored 20 PhDs. He also was advisor to World Health Organization on essential medicine and to International Foundation for Science. He's fellow of the Pakistan Academy of Sciences and the World Academy of Sciences, which we commonly call as TRUST, and he represented Pakistan in the United Nations meetings on science, technology, and innovation. Professor Gilani, please.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hello. Can you hear me? Now say.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Professor Qasim, for your kind introduction. It's a pleasure and honor to be here and presenting this my thoughts on this particular topic. What I will do is I will present few slides, general slides on Pakistan, and then I will follow my own experience. In challenges facing scientists in developing countries, we all know the major challenges that we face in our country is the funding. So look at the funding here. You can see in Pakistan, close to 0.3% of their GDP is spent, whereas Israel and South Korea are the highest spending on the R&D. So this is the state of funding, and particularly look at this, the comparison with the neighboring countries, India and Pakistan. China is spending incremental, huge on science and technology. India is also stable. In Pakistan, not only funding is small, but more problem is fluctuation of funding. Funding is not stable enough. But the good thing is that at the peak in 2007, there was a peak of funding, and then there was a effect of this one was the large number of publication peak in Pakistan. Then look at this large number of PhDs and then large number of publications growing with rapidly because it's a linked with number of PhDs. Yet, if you compare with other countries in the region, Pakistan is still here. We're far behind in country like Malaysia and Iran and Turkey. So yeah, we are still here. Funding challenges for basic research, this is a global problem, but more so in our country. So the fundamental research in the last decade or so, the focus is on applied research or the being basic scientist, I can say. It's more like in my area, it's more like in clinical sciences than in basic science. So I, being a health scientist working in a medical school, so I have to be a basic or fundamental scientist. There are two components there, basic scientists working and bit, and then the clinical sciences. Even in that particular institution, there is certain degree of, bias or priority for the clinical sciences, and not only funding, but many other things. And that I try to learn how to live with that particular situations. And what I learned is perhaps if we can integrate with the clinical scientists, knowing the research is the integration, how to work in a team. So I will share with you, the case study at the Al University, how I was able to. So I happen to be, on one hand, I was the director of PhD program in National Board of Research, that was my own group, but at the same time, I was the director of PhD program in health sciences. So funding and all those things are there. What I not only developed the model with me, but also at the Al University, and that PhD student is the pivotal role if you can invite the supervisors which from different areas, the clinical and the basic sciences together by supervising those PhD students. So that could help, the bridge. I will show the two examples. So this is the PhD thesis of my PhD student. The topic of research was effect of combination of turmeric and clonidine in metabolic syndrome in fructose-fed rats. This is the fundamental science, the basic science, the lab to clinic. What is translation research? When we talk about health sciences, is from lab to the clinic, or lab to the patient. So the first component, what we design studies which would involve or engage basic scientists as well as the clinical scientists, acting through the supervision of a PhD student. So this was the topic. The second the component was a double-blind randomized controlled trial. So the last portion of that was the clinical component, where the clinician or the applied scientist was engaged. So look at this. This is the supervision committee. I happen to be the main primary supervisor, and then the co-supervisors were the clinical, the professor of medicine. He was the co-supervisor, and then also the other two components, the public health one. So this combination developed a program or research which attracted funding from within the Al University, huge funding for this clinical trial. Had I applied on the local research, the fundamental research, there was less chances for getting the funding. So engaging the clinician, so this helped. And the advantage was, this was a unique study where he applied the research. The fundamental, the first objective was, this was the first objective, basic sciences research, lab sciences. Second was co-administration of the half the dose, how to see if you talk about the dosage of the drug or the medicine, this can be tested only in the animal if you like to titrate the dose. You cannot titrate the dose on human. So the component that is animal study, so all these things were done on animal study, how to, in those particular hypertension, hyperglycemia, dyslipidemia, hyperinsulinemia, endothelial, these are the common interest topics. I should mention those ones. What are these? Two different doses. A formulation was developed and then these particular metabolic disorders, those were tested in the animal. Doses was calculated, the optimal dose, and then those studies were translated into the animal. The third component was low dose combination, that you would reduce the dose to the half of the individual, but combine them, the effect is enhanced. So this is what we call in health sciences, it is synergistic effect. So all these three components belongs to the fundamental science, and that was done in animal or the lab study. And once it is done, the next step was the clinical study. So 3/4 of the component of this whole study was the fundamental science, and then the last was the clinical or the applied science, testing it on the human. So eventually the fundamental scientist, he was the primary scientist, he got the funding in everything, but was simply involved in the clinical. Not only the study, the beauty of study was enhanced, but also attracted funding as well as publication in high impact journal. Another study was also the same thing. This is again common in interest study. As you can see the title, the studies on underlying mechanism for effectiveness of almonds in dyslipidemia, or the high cholesterol, the endothelial dysfunction, and supplemented by a clinical trial. I mean, the almonds in our culture, everyone knows they are good for brain, but not many people know they are good for heart. So we designed a study that they are very good for heart, they can protect the heart attack if they are taken in it. So novelty of this study was, I can see the innovation is always related with fundamental science, not in the clinical. So what was the innovation here? The scientists, if you go to the US, in the US, FDA side is written, if you take 1.5 ounce of almond daily, it can protect your heart. But that 1.5 ounce is 40 to 50 grams, large dose. We thought, novelty is, we thought in our culture, if you take only 10 grams of almond, by simply soaking overnight and taking them next day on empty stomach, only 10 grams or 10 almonds are effective enough for this thing, whereas the Americans, they used to take 50 almonds daily for that, but to 5 times high dose. What they do is, they do almonds in a sack. With pizza, with food, with all those things, we take with the traditional way, all the traditional way we take. This is the novelty of the study. You take empty stomach and overnight soaking, vitamin E content, other things. So that was done with the animal studies. Again, the supervisory committee, this is the basic scientists, but the main supervisor, the other was cardiologist and the public health scientist. This is the integration of what we call the translation study. So there were four objectives: development of the rat model of disease. You have got to develop a model, only then test, then exploring the mechanistic pathways, again the fundamental research, then comparison of different doses and modes. That was again done on animal study, and at the end it was tested on the human, what we call the clinical trial, and this component led to this whole process of translational study from lab to the clinic. And yet the outcome was 4 quality publications from 1 PhD thesis, 3 publications as a fundamental scientist, and the 4th publication, the clinical trial of international standard, that was published in American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, the top journal in nutrition. The novelty of this study is that almonds are also effective in raising your good cholesterol. HDL is considered to be good cholesterol. In South Asian population, this is good cholesterol which protects the heart is deficient. Most of the major heart attacks are done because of low HDL in South Asian population. A large number of heart attacks. And this is the first study in Pakistan and whole world that almonds are also effective in HDL, not only improve the other bad cholesterol, but also the raise good cholesterol. So this are the study done basically as a fundamental, lab done, then translated into the patient data, and then it led to the global quality. So not only it affected funding, it affected different scientists from different things, quality of the study improves and everything. So this is the example perhaps that you combine, invite the others, the basic scientists there, invite the clinical or the applied scientists, work together, and we all know the research is a developing a team, whoever the research. So this is the important way. Thank you very much, Andy. I know the time was up. Can I leave this?
Thank you, Dr. Gilani. It was a very nice presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, we learned something very important in his presentation. One was that in Pakistan, unfortunately, there is very little funding for research and development. Number two, there is even more smaller share for applied research. And he has at least taught me the trick, how to extract money from the donor agencies by combining basic research with applied research. Part of the research which is fundamentally rooted in basic science, but ultimately having some connectivity with the applied aspect also. That's what I realize he's successfully been pursuing. And one last thing, that almonds are very good for health. So let's all consume appropriate quantity of almond for our good health.
Overnight soaking, the first thing.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. And with this, we now go to the next speaker, that is Professor Yangang Bao. He is Professor and Deputy Director, Institute of Computer Technology, Chinese Academy of Sciences. The topic is Agile and Open Source Hardware for Next Generation Computing. Professor Bao is leading the Research Center for Advanced Computing Systems of the ICT. His research focuses on computer systems and served on program committees of many topic tier conferences. His research work has been adopted by industry companies including Alibaba, Huawei, and Intel. With these few words, I request Professor Bao to kindly benefit us with his presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So let me share my slide. Okay, so this is my talk. Today I'm going to talk about a specific case study for the fusion of research and education. Actually, Agile and open source hardware is a new research trend for the next generation, but also I added one keyword, education, in the title, because I think in my talk I will mainly talk about how the Agile and open source is beneficial for education. So this is my agenda, my talk's agenda. So, actually, just as I mentioned, that the open source hardware is a new trend. So about 5 years ago, so in our computer architecture area, there's a visioning workshop to look forward about 15 years later. So we concluded that open source hardware will be one of the biggest themes in 2030. 3 years later, so there's another visioning workshop. So this with the specific topic on the Agile and open source, open hardware for next generation of computing. So there are 11 talks from like UC Berkeley, MIT, and Stanford, and as well as the companies like NVIDIA, Google, and also DARPA. So I was invited to give an invited talk on this workshop to introduce the research and education in China about this topic. Well, so actually there are also
more attention being paid from the world. For example, like the economics, there's an article in the 2019, the October issue. The article stated that the open source hardware such as RISC-V may lead to the similar expansion to other devices in the decade to come, just like the open source software. So this is open source hardware is a new trend. There are at least two driving forces to push the open source hardware. One is the Bell's law. We all know the Moore's law. Actually, in the computer area, there's another law called Bell's law. The law is saying that every 10 years, a new class of a computer will emerge with new processor, new programming platform, and a new user interface. And what is next? We see we are looking at the Internet of Things, also with artificial intelligence. We call it AIoT is the next. But AIoT, one challenge is fragmentation, is fragments. So, but there is one way to tackle the challenge of fragments. This is open source. Open source is a very effective approach to tackle the challenge of fragments by reusing components and reducing the overhead. For example, in China, so there are about like 5 million, more than 5 million apps are developed by Chinese people, Chinese companies and teams. They rank the ranking #1 of the world. This is because of the open source software. This is one driving force. The second driving force is training talents. So actually, about like 4 years ago, we have done a statistic about how those talent architects work, where are they work. So we found a very surprising or kind of dramatic data. So only 4 of the talent architects worked in China, while 85% stayed in the United States. So this is a very, we need to change the situation, we need to train the talent architects in China. So we need to figure out ways. So, but actually, this is not the only case in China, but if you look back 40 years ago, at that time, actually US also encountered the same situation. For example, in 1982, there were less than 100 students and faculty conducted silicon research. So, but the US has changed the situation by launching a new project called MOSES. This is funded by DARPA. MOSES provides chip design tools and related services that enable universities, government agents, research institutes, and business to prototype chip efficiently and cost effectively. So this is a kind of agile design to reduce the barriers of innovation. So today, how can we reduce the barrier of chip design? Actually, let's take a look at the open source software again. So this is a typical framework of open source, with the open source operating system like Linux, and open source compiler, GCC and LLVM, and open source like a software package. Then those open source softwares can provide more than 90% of lines of codes. Which means those codes can be reused directly. This can save a lot of efforts and time. And then if we want to design our own app or own software, we only need to write the customized codes by less than 10% of the total apps. So in this way, we can develop an app by just like 3 to 5 engineers within 3 to 5 months, very fast. So then we want to borrow the idea of open source software and to build the open source hardware, just the same, the framework. The framework can provide like 90% of the hardware, the CPU components. And if we want to build our customized processor or chips, we only need to build less than 10% of hardware components. So it can save time to market and can also reduce the cost of like IPs, like EDO tools and facilities and labels. So it can save a lot of efforts and money. So next is, this is just the trend of the open source hardware. But next I will introduce what we have done in the Chinese Academy of Sciences. So we have divided the open source ecosystem with like several tasks. For example, like we have working on the Agile chip design platform, which is deployed on the cloud. And we are also building open source high performance RISC-V core. And also like we are working on the open source EDO tools. More importantly, we have launched a 10-year one student, one chip project. The project is going to train not every student, to train those students to graduate with the chip designed by them ourselves. So next I will introduce this project more specifically. The project was launched in 2 years ago in 2019. So 5 undergraduates, they participated in the project. And the goal of the project is to let each undergraduate graduate with a chip designed by themselves. So this is a very tense development. So the students needed to finish their design in just 4 months. Here is the timeline of their development. Finally, they have successfully built the chip. And the chip is a 64 RISC-V CPU, and to support like Linux, the commercial, most widely used operating system of the world. And the chip was taped out by the CIMIC, the 110 nanometer technology. It can run like 350 megahertz. So this is the demo, and the chip and can run like Linux, and to show the logo of the CAS. And our student was demonstrating the chip designed by themselves and on their thesis defense last year. So it was, we are very excited to see that their design was accepted to the RISC-V Global Forum 2020. So entitled the Nutshell, Linux compatible RISC-V processor designed by undergraduates. So the forum accepted 29 technical reports in total. And this is the only the talk given by undergraduates. And also the project was reported by more than like 20 media newspapers, like gains like more than like 100 million views. And also president of CAS, Professor Chun-Li Bai was introducing the project on the first class of last semester. So that is the first year, one student, one project, one chip project. Now we are working, we have finished the second year, the project. We started last year, last August, and 11 undergraduates attended the project. They are from 5 universities this time. And we have reduced the cost from $8,000 per student to only like $3,000 per student. The cost is largely reduced. And this is the real chip. So you can see that there are like 10 designs in one chip. And now the third student one chip project will start soon to support about like 100 undergraduates this year. The long-term goal of the project is to support like 10,000 students by 2030. To summarize, yes, open source hardware such as RISC-V may lead to a similar expansion of other devices in the decade to come. I just quote from the economics. But I want to emphasize that China will contribute more to the open source hardware community. And also the open source hardware brings significant impact on the computer system education. That is my talk. Thank you very much.
Even though I'm not a person of computer sciences, nevertheless, I think that computer sciences have revolutionized the world, the information system, the communication system, and many other applications, including the robots. And I'm glad to see that people like you are contributing more and more to the future development and welfare of the world. Thank you very much. I think that we are now marching towards the end of the session, and that is we probably go to panel discussion. Am I right, Professor Chow?
Yeah, me?
Yes, please. I think.
All right. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Let me handle the panel discussion. So obviously that we have a lot of excellent presentations and points raised, and thanks to my team in collaboration with our colleagues and friends, the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. In particular, I guess that our Hungarian friends prepared some of the points here. Can we show them on the screen? There are 4. But obviously, we're not confined by this list. In case that we have questions from the speakers, from the listeners, viewers, you can raise them up. And the questions are as follows: how to fill the gaps between fundamental science and technology innovation in education system? Are there any best practices, lessons, suggestions to the universities? A second is how to create and maintain a research education platform that link the fundamental science with applied research and innovation. And also third advice is to undergraduates and graduates interested in tech innovation, I guess creating a company, develop a device to needs of science, needs of the society. Fourthly, the proposal of international collaboration framework in basic research, especially for developing countries. Well, the last one, but why a international collaboration framework in fundamental science for developing countries? Oh, those are the questions. So the discussion is open. All right, Professor Jan, please go ahead.
No, I would suggest that you kindly invite openly anyone, as you said, but we go in the questions one by one. Let's request people, whoever wishes to make comment on the first question or the first point, and once we are through with that, then we go to the next and so on. Please.
All right, yeah. Then let's start with the first one, okay? So on the best practices, I can start. I visited a lot of universities, a lot of research institutes internationally. And I have to say that an MIT and Stanford, have a lot of best practices and for, tech innovation and spin-offs and tech transfers. So you look at even the building at MIT, all the Stanford, they have that culture. They have that open system. They have the, cross-disciplinary interaction convergences, across campuses. There's so many opportunities and platforms for scientists with different backgrounds to interact with each other. That is definitely, I just want to start with that, then I seek, and who wants to answer that question? So Dr. Zhou, Vice President of Beijing Normal University, I feel to listen, you were mentioning your presentation about the interdisciplinary research in the Normal University.
All
Can
right.
you elaborate?
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Chow. I was really very encouraged by the presentations this evening. So many insights and very valuable experiences. So I just want to share our university experience for the international cooperation to develop programs which cover different disciplines, traditional disciplines. So we work with Stanford and also Helsinki University. So 3 universities work together to organize groups composed of faculty members and also students. At Stanford, there is iSchool. So a D-School, not iSchool. That means design school. Actually, that school is very open. Includes the disciplines for electronic engineering, also electronic the mechanics. So after we collaborated to work out the new ones, our university opened design thinking. So design thinking is really an interdisciplinary program. So our students from Beijing Normal benefit from that program. And also the Smart Institute of Higher Education, which is the home for that. And also another one is for the Innovation Center, which is a Sino-US Innovation Center. So that is also another part of the university. Because of that program, we initiated an institutional competition program involving the students from the other parts of the world, including Tunisia and also for former Yugoslavia and some other countries' students. So for that, I do see the potential for the fundamental science and technology innovation marriage. So without the very strong basic research and basic learning, I don't believe the students can follow the innovation program because they work across the disciplines. So Dr. Chow, that is my personal experience and also what my colleagues have done. So that's my point.
Okay, good. So I would like to hear in the Hungarian experience. You see, you have the National Academy of Sciences. How do you stress? And I don't know whether you have a university in CS case that, CS has, 3 universities, and but in the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, how do you promote the fundamental research and innovation?
Okay. I try to answer this, not an easy question. We are in a different phase than before. Last year, the academy was separated from its former set of research institution by law. Oh. That means that at the moment we don't have, we had never university under the control of the Academy of Sciences, but now we don't have any research institution under the supervision or guidance of the academy. This is a changed philosophy by the present government. They wanted to have something else. So our playground is much more indirect. We have 18,000 fellows who are members of the body of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Out of these, 365 are academicians, and a good number has a degree of science, a doctoral degree in sciences, and a huge number of PhDs. So the strategy probably by now is that we should use our knowledge and experience to convince the higher education system and also all the others who are interested in doing research, be rational, be practical, and rely on rational approaches of problems. So probably the main message that one should be able to identify problems to be solved. One should realize that this majority of these problems are multidisciplinary. So you are practically not able to solve this problem as you, as a person, as a single entity. You should develop collaboration, and you should understand the language of the other, first to understand the relevance of the problem and to gather colleagues with whom you can work on. But this is not an easy avenue, because in the past when we had such induction, we had background institution, and we were able to provide financial support as well for practicing this kind of approach. Now we have the good advices, but fortunately we have good number of members who are working at universities and also some in industry. So by intelligent understanding of this problem and by delivering this message to the colleagues who are there to work with, I think we have the chance to make the advice at the individual level. Not speaking too much, but I wish to emphasize also another role of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, established in 1825. It is recognized as a system with the ability to provide advice for the nation. And this responsibility is on our shoulder, and we try to do our best and develop various novel approaches.
Thank you. And definitely that's not the good news to the Chinese Academy of Sciences. You know, we used to say, look, the Austrian Academy of Sciences, the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, they have research institutes. You say, well, let's drop that issue. May I ask, if we don't have a volunteer, may I ask the speakers or the speaker from Singapore to elaborate the Singapore experience? Do we have him?
So you would like to know how to eliminate the gap between fundamental science and technology and innovation-oriented research. I think Singapore has a very clear strategy here, namely the drivers and the motivators for students, faculty, and researchers are very clear. Whereas in the past, for academic researchers, the main motivator, which was important for the researcher's career path and progression in the university career, was the number of publications. And therefore, researchers are usually not, or were usually not, so much motivated to work on IP, patents, know-how, protocols, guidelines, and so on, because it was not a major outcome measure of their university performance level. In Singapore, it's very clear that the main motivator in a university position is how many innovations, how many spin-offs, how many IP-related, know-how related performance indicators, key performance indicators have you performed, have you delivered. So I think we have to change our mindset in the sense that in academia, not only the good publications should count, but also your number of spin-offs, your number of patents, your number of know-how related key performance indicators. It's just a question of changing our mindset from the pure publication-based approach to a more complex publication plus other indicators-based approach. That's
okay.
The Singaporean example.
Yes, that's a Singapore scenario. That is obvious because related to Singapore science policy as elaborated in your presentation. And also you provided a solution that is a balanced approach to relevance. Fundamental science and innovation all targeted to issue related, but you have to balance the basic and applied. That appears to be a better approach.
So allow me to give you just one very recent example. It's about a Hungarian researcher who works not in Hungary, in Switzerland, Boton Roska, who published last week in Nature the first article about a born blind subject who, with his approach, an optogenetic approach, regained his vision. This is the very first, I would say, landmark publication in the field, how blindness can be cured, remediated or cured. And this is a great publication. But the publication is only a minor thing in this case. The major issue is, if this new approach works, millions of blind people can regain their vision. And so in this case, nice publication, great. But the outcome, the real life scenario outcome, is even more important. As simple as that.
Well, so personally, I really enjoy that point. I think that the creation of knowledge, as mentioned by one speaker, I guess Professor Zhou, is just for the knowledge sake, is okay. If you have, abundant resources, but if you only have limited resources, you have to create the knowledge for usefulness. But about this, I also want to say that again, US has a lot of good models, like the Broad Institute at MIT, very interdisciplinary, having all kinds of engineers and scientists together, like Stanford, the BioX, in a similar story. They produced lots of innovations. Also around the campuses, you have a cluster of innovative companies. So I guess, and we have to move on to the next question, and we'll come back in case we have time. How maintain a research education platform that link fundamental science with applied research and innovation. That is a big topic, but people often talk about the IPs, spin-offs from university campuses. I did a deep analysis, okay? And talking, we have lots of noise, but if you look at the revenue, it's not that much as people anticipated. Okay, that's a conclusion that I concluded about 10 years ago. You know, perhaps we have new developments. Anyway, so I want to seek a Dan, please.
I would like to make a very general statement here, and that is, in my honest opinion, there isn't a sharp line dividing applied research and fundamental research. I think that fundamental research ultimately has in its roots somewhere some applicability. I mean, I, as a geologist, for example, I go for geological field work. I don't know what is there. So it's basic research, but I may find something there. Unless I go there for basic research, I wouldn't be able to find what there is. So what I'm trying to say is that the beauty of basic research is that it creates new knowledge, and it is really the foundation for innovation and future applicability of research. And I think that while there is obviously in many countries, including my country, Pakistan, this a lot of talk about the importance of research for society, blah, 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 blah. But I think we have to convince the policymakers that there isn't such a sharp division as some of us have been trying to create. Thank you.
Yes. Well, and do we have another speaker who wishes to answer the questions? Yeah, Joe. Yes, please, Bao.
I think this is a really very important question for the current higher education in the terms of how we prepare our next generation to deal with uncertainties. So how to bring research into education. I just give you an example. We have an innovation center at the Beijing Normal. Psychology is very strong in our university. Traditionally, very basic research for development psychology and also for social psychology, a lot of paperwork and also a lot of programs. But during the past several years, we built the innovation center. We try to involve the partners from industries to join us. So then we know what's the true demand from the real society. For example, the students, directed by the faculty members, design a bra for the woman, because depression is very common, to some extent, not disease, but near to the psychological the problems. So the bra use the psychological research and also use the engineering and the new technology. They use the bra to detect the level of the depression. So that is a brilliant idea for the center. So what the center was really doing to bridge the research and the demand. So I think that the research education platforms really matters. It can make difference. So that is one case for our experience. So Dr. Chow, thank you for the opportunity for me to say.
Yes. Yeah, obviously that, in that kind of environment, you have to seek the opinions of engineers, entrepreneurs. In other words, you have to understand the market, If you don't understand the market, in other words, like the point I made at the beginning, I sort of feel that the innovation, technology progress really drive fundamental science, even though the other way around is the case. However, it's really the technology innovation advances that drives the frontier research, okay? And I think, let's temporarily, leave this topic. We move on, and in case, we have, interest, we'll get back. The third question is advice to undergraduates, graduates interested in tech innovation. So do we have why not we have that, we need a lady, to answer the question. Say, yeah, Amaner? Yes. You want? You think, how do you think about it? Super Amaner. Sub, yeah, sub, at least, we have, yeah. Can you answer that one? Is that a good idea? It's a big question, some of the students, they haven't mastered very deep knowledge. They want to join the innovation, okay? And the environment of the marketing can kill them, okay? In other words, yeah, they will be screwed up if they don't have the solid preparation in knowledge, you see. I have friends, they have children, they run into that kind of situation. Yeah. So do we have an answer or who wants to address that question? We have that lady in the corner. No? Busher.
To tell the truth, it is not easy to answer this question because there are different cultures and different histories in countries. So we have different answers in Hungary. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Very good, yeah.
We have different answers in Hungary, possibly different answers in China and different answers in Chile. So my personal experiences naturally are from Central Europe, let's say a bit wider. So here, maths and physics, chemistry are strong subjects.
We're not hearing you.
Also. So there are there is strong basis for this knowledge, and we can build on this education system, which is to be said to be a Prussian or German origin. But we can say this structure is very strong, for example, in Russia also. So universities can build on this historical basis. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, we have problems with ladies or girls. Not bad word, not problems, but we have to encourage ladies and girls to study maths and physics and these subjects so that they could go on further towards universities. So the basis, to my mind, is relies on elementary schools and to encourage curiosity, which was mentioned today sometimes. Curiosity and strong basis. They are together can help. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. So in a university education setting, it's very important to balance curiosity-driven and applied, because a speaker mentioned that, it's very important to pass on the spirit, the novelty, and creation to the future generations. Yeah, you mentioned that. Yes, Professor, you want to elaborate? It's so important. If you don't have that, then we'll lose. Please.
Yeah, I would add one point. I have experience for about 25 years in mentoring high school students in Hungary, and as you mentioned, our chair, that there is a problem that students who you would like to involve in a discovery kind of research don't have the necessary preparation. So what I usually did was to simplify the problem situation, but at the same time highlight to the students that what they will do is really innovative because it's not been done. Let me give you one example. I have many examples, but one example about good 10 years ago when Facebook was a new thing for high school generation, I had a team of high school students with whom we made the first questionnaire and then login-based research in Hungary over the use of different social media and other things like email and blah, blah, blah by high school students. And my pupils understood that this has never been done before. And it was actually a very interesting breakthrough little research where they didn't need too much theoretical preparation, but they could understand the hands-on experience of doing something new and, as Balázs Gulyás reminded us, and socially relevant, because it was pretty much socially relevant. For example, we were the first ones to describe in Hungary already 15 years ago that email, which was a basic transmission channel for our generation, was absolutely obsolete for high school students 15 years ago already. They said, email message, that's only from the principal when there is some problem in school. I never read my email and all that stuff. So anyway, my message is that you have to simplify the problem in order to avoid theoretical mispreparation, and at the same time, present the students problems to solve that are really new.
Yeah. So Professor, I want to say that I enjoy your comparison. Your comparison mentioned about the curiosity-driven scientists and the managers. The different definitions of man size. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I want to ask Professor Gilani, Vice Chancellor, University Hyper. So I guess the audience is puzzled, about the slide you show. You say very little funding. So look at the charts. It appears that Pakistan's funding for research is going down. That's the chart. But you mentioned about increasing number of publications. How come that the Pakistan was able to achieve that? At least look at the chart. That appears to be the case. And of course, also you have very little bit of funding, but you did the double-blinded trials. That's also impressive. Share the experience with us.
The funding was starting to increase in 2005 to 7 was peak. and then continue that, and that peak that start coming down. That's true. And but there were a number of initiatives at that time that large number of PhD scholarships, both indigenously, in local. There were some incentives, some financial incentives as well, and also large number of PhD students were sent abroad. And that policy continued. A large number of universities. Now there are large number of PhDs compared to, I mean, I'm talking about 15 years ago when that policy was there was large funding. At that time, the allotted capacity was an issue. There was the funding, sufficient funding, people were not prepared, I mean, to spend that. That funding continued, so that was the thing. In a few years, yes, large number of funding, and that momentum goes on. See, and the number of PhD students continued, and particularly in China, for example, large number of PhD students there on. They develop collaboration, and large number of universities are there. Our young, see, at my age, there are only few scientists, less number of scientists. But in young, after in the age of 30s or early 40s, there are large number of scientists. They are collaborating, they have limited funds, yet they are collaborating, going abroad, and there are a number of programs which the students were sent abroad. And even that number of programs are still there. For example, there is a provision of going abroad for a postdoc. That funding is there, yet there. A PhD student enrolled in Pakistani University, there is a provision that at least 6 months they can go abroad. They will go abroad for 6 months, funding is available. And once they go there, say in China, US, Europe, wherever, they work very hard, and then the professors there, they continue funding them. So they make their own space. There are a number of ways and means, I mean, but the main answer is that large number of PhDs are being produced, working here, coming back, going back, and this is transition. And this is how the
funding is reducing.
Yes, funding is reducing, but not stable. I mean, the lowest level is stable. But there was only last year, I mean, only 10 years ago, over 15 years ago, that there was a funding for a few years, and that carried somewhere. I hope I made some part here.
Thank you. So that echoes to my guessing, because the students from Pakistan are very competitive in terms of academic merits. That's why within the UCAS campuses, we have the largest number of students from Pakistan. Very fortunate for Pakistan, but sometimes it's less fortunate for other countries. Again, they are very competitive. Let me shift to the, the fourth question that relates to the, the third. Professor Bao. So here we're talking about, giving advice to undergraduate and graduates. You actually give the tool, to the students to achieve deep designs, okay? That also relates to the last question, international collaboration. Do you think the tool you provide to the rest of the world, be an innovative tool to students overseas, young research overseas? Yeah. You combine that tool, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Cao. So I think actually open source is actually a new kind of research form, and to encourage students to do research and to do innovation. Since I think that the key idea behind open source is sharing, so people can share their design, their insights, their wisdom on the same platform. And so actually, why, like in UCAS, we can, five undergraduates can achieve the design of a CPU in just 4 months. This is because they have built on top of open source infrastructure. So I think that this kind of infrastructure can be shared all over the world, not just in China. So actually, I'm looking forward to the platform to be to be adopted by many other countries. So I'm also willing to promote this platform.
Well, you know, I really like that idea because that feeds to the Chinese proposal, you know, create the global community with a shared, you know, future, you see. So also, if I understand you correctly or understood you correctly, they said that in US case, before the adoptions of Moses, there were less chip designs, but because of open source, they adopted. I hope, you know, China will catch up and together with the rest of the world. Thank you for your contribution. And I learned that Dr. Yuan Yaxiu is on the line, you know, academician Yuan is on the line. And
I'm back.
Yeah, you're back. Great. You know, you finished part of the business in the General Assembly of two in Academy of Sciences. So you mentioned a lot of interesting points, you know, in your presentation on the mathematics. Okay, we need new you know, branches of mathematics to advance that areas to address the competitive challenges where humankind faces, and we need to improve the value system, you know, so as to encourage cross-disciplinary research and so on and so forth. And also, you feel that we have challenges in China to advance in mathematics. How we can, you know, take advantage of the Ansel family, all right? Also, from your point of view, that I really want to sell your concept that Silk Road, you know, Academy of Sciences of Center, you know, and I mentioned that a number of years ago that I'm very keen to support summer schools, trainings for the young. So, you know, in case that once we bring the pandemic under control, okay, that will create the environment. But your perspective, how we jointly advance mathematics and capacity building for the benefits, you know, a lot of countries in the world, including China.
I want to say quite a few words about collaboration. Really, mathematics is very special, where, you know, exchange really very important. Look at, I mean, all the fields. So about half of them have visited the Princeton Institute, and, you know, mathematicians like to, and I mean, to visiting. So China, I mean, the mathematical, we're trying to things, you know, we're trying to the version of Princeton at one institute. We're trying very hard to do in this. So we're trying to actually also the Chinese Mathematics Society joined with the Chinese Academy of Science. We're also trying to set up like a German Open Wolfach Institute where we can organize some schools. So under the Ansel frame, so I hope, I mean, the future we can organize things. So I hope all the country, Pakistan, all the, I mean, even Chile, I mean, so we can have some kind of close or collaboration, particularly in mathematics. We don't need we can just people traveling. So we hope to do this. So I think that optimistic in this aspect. So I can hope use this Ansel platform. I mean, we can attract more national mathematical organization to join the Circular Mathematical Center. We can promote mathematical development in all our countries. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, you know, Professor Yuan, because the Ansel attached a lot of significance to capacity building, okay, or buildings, you could say, particularly for the developing countries. And we can definitely do a lot in that regard. And then about the fourth, question that relates to international collaboration framework in fundamental science. So I believe that fundamental science definitely includes mathematics and education. So that is within the strategic objective answer and vision. So we tend to give higher attention to that regard. Okay. So anybody who wishes to talk about international collaboration scheme, how we join our forces and provide more assistance to capacity building in the developing countries. And I have to say that among our ANSO student portfolio, 300 PhDs and 200 masters, and we deliberately set aside about 40 PhD students to the least developed countries in partnership with TWAS, with UNESCO. So, all right.
Yeah, Professor. Yeah, thank you very much. This is Lord Gilani from Pakistan.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Please.
I think you rightly mentioned this interaction between those who have the funding sources and then to invite scientists from the least developed countries where they have the talent. I mean, they have the talent. So also inviting students that say, you rightly mentioned, this is the platform. From the least developed country, they have the less funding, but they have the talent. I mean, I worked in Ethiopia, a country like Ethiopia, the least developed country, but huge talent. They're very brilliant. I mean, say Pakistan, we have less funding. I mean, one of the answers that there were a large number of publications in Pakistan, we have a huge talent. Our young students, they are very intelligent, they work very hard. And this interaction, for example, this interaction between China and Pakistan, we are sending large number of PhD students to China. In China, give funding. And this interaction is very fruitful for both countries. I see the students that come here returning from China. They have large number of publications, very well trained. This is the model that we got to have, whatever the strengths, wherever the strengths are, identify the strengths and collaborate. I mean, collaboration is the PhD student with best support.
Can I add something to it, please?
Please, yeah.
I would like to, number one, I'm a very strong supporter of international collaboration. I think that it is not too big a problem collaborating as long as people don't have closed minds. Although many of the developing countries, not all, but many of the developing countries are lacking in funding, but then there are some other advantages, for example, the field advantage. Let's take the example, Pakistan is one of the most has the biggest glaciers in the world. Now this is a positive, and people from outside countries can come collaborate with us. We provide the local hospitality, and they provide in their country the equipment and the expertise. We have mutual visits, and we do joint work. So what I'm saying is, number one, there is I think that we are living in a world where no country is complete on its own, and international cooperation, not only in research, but in many other areas, is very important, as is on the agenda of ANSO. And the second thing is that I think that we, with appropriate approach and open minds, can collaborate for mutual benefit. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Professor Jan, I can't second more with the point you raised. I'm a believer of international scientific collaboration because I strongly feel that we mankind need that kind of activities to advance our knowledge, to advance the human abilities, to address a lot of the common challenges. Look what they face, issues, extreme situations caused by the intensified climate change, the natural disasters, the disease we face, a lot of eco-environmental challenges. So together, we can make a much better difference. Also, for the future of humanity, we need to join our hands together and efforts together to advance the knowledge, to advance the ability for our own good. So, and I have to thank the Hungarian Academy of Sciences and my team, headed by, Professor Ali Kun, who herself is an atmospheric physicist. And I want Li Kun just to say a few words on behalf of the Secretariat who prepared in partnership with Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Li Kun, please, that's roughly right. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I want to say thanks to the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, because in past 3 months, actually, we are working together on this workshop very closely. We are organizing the webinar once a week to talk about a lot of details, arrangement of this workshop. So yesterday and today, I enjoyed the speech and the discussion very much. I really, thanks to all the people who contributed to this workshop, especially to the staff from Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Thank you so much. So,
yeah. Okay, and before I hand the mic to Professor Jan to make the concluding remarks, and I have to say that without consulting the speakers of yesterday, and I did seek your advice. I did had a little communications with Professor Jan. So we're going to compile the presentations made in this entire conference, yesterday and today. And I kindly invite Professor Jan and the Vice President from Hungarian Academy of Sciences to be the editors. Thank you. Now, Professor Jan, you take the floor.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to thank all our colleagues for making wonderful presentations. Look at today's topics. They cover such a wide range, from mathematics, computer science, pharmacy, to case studies, to education, basic science, applied science, talent hunting, and young talent hunting. That was something yesterday very nicely presented by a couple of people. Particularly, I was impressed very much by our colleague from Russia, that the way they are gearing themselves to giving responsibility to future generation. We talked a lot about innovation and its relationship to applied science. Ultimately, I totally agree with this concept that all knowledge, whether it is education, through education or through research, it should add to the welfare of the society. Because ultimately, this is what should the purpose be. The basic research is a separate issue, but even there, where you make progress, you discover natural processes, they are adding to our knowledge and as well as to the human culture. So this is something we should keep in mind. And I would like to, towards the closure of what I would say is that I think we need to have collaboration. We need to have international collaboration. We need to have multi-institutional collaboration. We need to have multidisciplinary approach. And we should always keep our eyes on quality, because whether it is in education or in research, quality is the most important part of the entire activity. My friend, Professor Chow, already has invited all of you to give your presentations, but ultimately putting them in the form of a book or whatever, an e-book. I would like to make a quick comment on that, and that is, those of you who have made PowerPoint presentations, they're perfectly fine. We can reproduce PowerPoint presentations and without taxing you to write a long text and spend your time on it. PowerPoint presentations are good enough. And those of you who did not have the PowerPoint presentations, they can then write briefly what they addressed. I'm sure that they would have the record of these proceedings. With these words, before I go, I would like to profusely thank the Hungarian Academy of Sciences for having floated the idea jointly with ANSU and the Chinese Academy of Sciences for this wonderful webinar. Quite honestly, I personally learned a lot, and I hope that we will have further opportunities in future to assemble together and learn from each other. Thank you very much. Stay happy, healthy, and well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. 行吗？科学。
Thank you so much. Thank you.
谢谢。哎，周老师，哪次啊？周老师，哎，
哎，曹老师你好，非常感谢。
拜拜拜拜。
好嘞。
拜拜拜拜拜拜
拜拜。
See you, Monash. Yeah, so good to see you.